The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes was the steady beeping of hospital monitors. The second was my sister Amanda's smug face looming over me. Finally awake, sleeping beauty, she smirked, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer handbag. "You've missed quite a lot." My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 32, I had spent the last 6 months in a coma following a suspicious car accident. As my vision cleared and consciousness fully returned, I realized Amanda wasn't just here for a family visit. The board voted unanimously. She continued, settling into the visitor's chair like it was a throne. "Innovatech is mine now. Dad's signature made it official last week. You should have seen how relieved everyone was to finally have competent leadership." I watched her carefully, my throat too dry to respond immediately. The company I'd built from the ground up, turned into a $50 million tech giant, was now apparently in the hands of my younger sister, who had never worked a day in her life. "Nothing to say." Amanda's smile widened. "The doctors weren't sure you'd wake up at all. I did what needed to be done. You snooze, you lose, sis." I let out a small laugh, which seemed to catch her off guard. "Check the safe," I managed to whisper. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed. "What?" "The safe in my office, behind the Rothko print." My voice was getting stronger. "You did check it, didn't you?" The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Amanda had always been predictable, so focus on the obvious prize that she missed the crucial details. "Of course I checked it," she lied smoothly, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. "There was nothing important in there." "Then you won't mind if my lawyer opens it tomorrow." I closed my eyes, feigning exhaustion. "You should call Dad, he'll want to know I'm awake." I heard her heels clicking rapidly across the hospital floor and smiled to myself. The safe contained everything. Documentation of every underhanded attempt she'd made to undermine me over the years, recordings of her conspiring with competitors, and most importantly, the real company succession plans I'd filed with my lawyers months before the accident. Even now, the memory was hazy. A truck running a red light, hitting my car at full speed. The police called it a tragic coincidence, but I had my suspicions. I had hired a private investigator the week before it happened, sensing something was wrong at the company. His final report had arrived the morning of the crash. That report was in the safe, too. My lawyer, Michael Chin, arrived within an hour of my father's emotional reunion visit. Amanda conspicuously hadn't returned. "Everything's ready," Michael said quietly, setting his briefcase down. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Do you feel up to it?" I nodded, already feeling stronger. "Tell me what happened while I was out." Michael's expression darkened. "Amanda moved fast. She convinced your father you'd made verbal promises to hand the company over to her. Said you were planning to step down anyway to find yourself, travel the world or something. The board was skeptical at first, but she had help." "Marcus?" I asked, referring to my CFO. "Yeah, he backed up her story, provided documentation showing you'd been planning this for months. Very convincing forgeries." I wasn't surprised. Marcus had been Amanda's friend since college. I had only kept him on because he was actually competent at his job. Clearly, loyalty wasn't his strong suit. "The company's taken a hit," Michael continued. "Stock's down 30% since Amanda took over. She's been making deals that don't make sense, selling off key patents, restructuring departments. It's like she's deliberately trying to weaken the company," I finished, "make it easier to sell off piece by piece. She never cared about running it, she just wants to cash out." The next morning, I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice. My father tried to protest, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He'd always tried to play peacemaker between Amanda and me, refusing to acknowledge her darker nature. "I trusted her," he said quietly as he helped me into his car. "She said it was what you wanted." I numbed Dad, I squeezed his hand. "But now it's time to make things right." The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. I had Michael wheel me into the conference room exactly 5 minutes before it started. The looks on their faces when I appeared, Amanda's shock, Marcus's pale fear, the board members' confusion made every ache in my healing body worth it. "This is inappropriate." Amanda started, standing up. "You're not well enough to be here." Sit down, Amanda, I said calmly. Michael, please open the safe. What happened next would be talked about in business circles for years to come. The documents Michael removed from my office safe told a story so damning that several board members had to leave the room to compose themselves. First came the surveillance footage showing Amanda meeting with our biggest competitors months before my accident. Then the email trails showing how she and Marcus had been systematically undermining major contracts, setting the stage for the company's decline. But it was the PI's report that hit hardest. Phone records showing Amanda had contacted the truck driver who hit my car multiple times in the weeks before the accident. He had disappeared right after, but his bank account had shown a substantial deposit from a shell company tied to Marcus. This is ridiculous, Amanda sputtered, but her composure was cracking. I was protecting the company. She was running it into the ground. The board chairman cleared his throat. Miss Mitchell, these documents paint a very different picture. Your sister grew this company's value by 300% in 5 years. The only decline we've seen started the day you took control. I watched my sister's face contort with rage and felt an odd sense of pity. She'd never understood that success wasn't just about wanting something. It was about being willing to work for it. Security will escort you and Mr. Marcus from the building, the chairman continued. The police have already been contacted regarding the accident investigation. I suggest you both contact your lawyers immediately. As they were let out, Amanda turned to me one last time. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. I smiled, thinking of the other documents still in the safe, the ones that would ensure she never came near my company again. Actually, I do. You snooze, you lose, sis. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of recovery, both personal and professional. The company's stock rebounded as soon as news broke of my return. Amanda and Marcus were arrested, facing charges of corporate fraud and attempted murder. My father visited every day, bringing old photos and stories, trying to understand where things had gone so wrong with Amanda. But I didn't have answers for him. Some people, I learned, simply couldn't stand to see others succeed. As I sat in my office a month later, finally strong enough to work full days again, I looked at the safe behind the Rothko print and smiled. Amanda had been right about one thing. I had been thinking about stepping down, but not to travel the world. I had been planning to start a new venture, something bigger. The documents detailing those plans were still in there, waiting. But they could wait a little longer. First, I had a company to rebuild, stronger than ever. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just winning, it's winning so completely that your opponents never dare to challenge you again. 6 months after Amanda's arrest, I was finally feeling like myself again. The company had recovered, but the echoes of my sister's betrayal still haunted the halls of Innovatech. The merger paperwork came through, Michael said, dropping a thick folder on my desk. But there's something else you should see. I looked up from my laptop, noting the concern in his expression. Amanda. He nodded. She's made bail. And she's been seen meeting with James Porter. A chill ran down my spine. James Porter, our biggest competitor, and the man Amanda had been conspiring with before my accident. He ran Porter Tech, a company infamous for aggressive takeovers and questionable ethics. That's not all, Michael continued. Someone's been buying up our shares through shell companies. We traced 3 of them back to Porter's subsidiaries. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Of course, Amanda wouldn't give up easily. She'd always been like this. When we were kids, she didn't just want to win. She wanted to destroy her opponents. How much of the company do they control? Almost 15%. Not enough for a takeover, but enough to cause trouble. I finished. Especially if they can convince other shareholders to join them. I walked to the window, looking out at the city's skyline. Innova Texas building stood proudly in the heart of the business district, a testament to everything I had built. Everything Amanda had tried to steal. There's more, Michael said quietly. The police investigation into your accident. The truck driver's been found. I turned sharply. Alive. He shook his head. Dead. Apparent suicide. But the timing is too convenient. I agreed. Any evidence? Nothing concrete. But he left a letter claiming Amanda paid him to run the light, said he couldn't live with the guilt. I thought about the safe behind the Rothko print. After Amanda's arrest, I had cleared out most of the documents, but not all of them. Some secrets needed to stay hidden until the right moment. Call the board, I said. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. And get me everything you can on Porter's recent activities. That night, as I worked late in my office, a familiar voice made me freeze. Working late, sis. Some things never change. Amanda stood in my doorway, looking immaculate as ever in a designer suit. Her electronic monitoring inklet was barely visible above her stiletto. How did you get in here? She smiled. That same smug smile I remember from a hospital. I still have friends in interesting places. We need to talk. About Porter? Or about the truck driver you had killed? Her smile didn't waver. About the future. Porter's offering to buy a Novatech. The price is generous. More than you get anywhere else. And let me guess, if I refuse, you and Porter will keep buying shares until you can force a takeover. Smart girl. She sat down uninvited. But there's an easier way. Sell now, walk away rich. Everyone wins. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was thinner than I remembered, with a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Prison, even briefly, had changed her. You never understood, did you? I said quietly. This company isn't just about money. It's about creating something meaningful. Making a difference. She laughed. Still the idealist. That's why you'll lose in the end. Business isn't about making a difference. It's about power. And I've learned a lot about power lately. Is that why you had the truck driver killed? To protect your power? I didn't. She cocked herself, smoothing her expression. Be careful with accusations like that, sis. They could get you into trouble. Like a suspicious car accident? She stood up, adjusting her jacket. Think about Porter's offer. You have 48 hours before the price drops. After that, well, there are other ways to acquire a company. After she left, I sat in silence for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone. Michael? Get me everything we have on Porter's finances. And I mean everything. It's time to open the other safe. The second safe, the one Amanda never knew about, was in my home office. Inside were documents I had hoped never to use, gathered over years of careful observation and planning. Porter wasn't as clean as he appeared. I had been collecting evidence of his illegal activities for years, suspecting he might become a threat. Tax evasion, insider trading, bribes to foreign officials, all carefully documented and verified. The next morning, I arrived at the board meeting early. Porter was already there, sitting next to Amanda, both looking confident. Miss Mitchell, Porter smiled, all corporate charm. I trust you've considered our offer? I have, I replied, taking my seat. And I have a counter-proposal. I nodded to Michael, who distributed folders to each board member. As they opened them, the room went silent. What is this? Porter demanded, his face reddening as he read. Evidence, I said calmly. Of everything you've been doing for the past decade, the SEC would be very interested in those offshore accounts, and the Justice Department might have questions about those contracts in ASEA. Amanda's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. Am I? I turned to the board. There's more. The recent share purchases through shell companies, they weren't just funded by Porter Tech. The money came from embezzled company funds, including some that disappeared during Amanda's brief leadership. Porter stood up abruptly. This is blackmail. No, I corrected him. This is business. You taught me that, remember? It's about power. The next hour was chaos. Porter stormed out, his takeover plans in shambles. Amanda stayed, becoming increasingly desperate as the board voted unanimously to block any future share purchases from Porter's companies. You've made a mistake. She hissed as security arrived to escort her out. This isn't over. But it was. By evening, Porter had withdrawn his offer and was frantically trying to contain the damage. The shell companies began selling their Novatech shares, and our stock price soared. A week later, I sat in my office with Michael, reviewing the aftermath. Porter's resigned, he reported. His board forced him out after an internal investigation. And Amanda? Yes. Her bail's been revoked. New evidence emerged about the truck driver's death. She'll be in prison for a long time. I nodded, feeling not triumph but a deep sadness. Has security swept the building again? Change all the codes. I want to make sure there are no more surprises. That night, I visited my father. He was in his study, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I saw the news about Amanda, he said quietly. Dad? No, let me finish. I should have seen it. All those years, the way she was. I thought I was being fair, treating you both equally, but I was just enabling her worst instincts. I sat beside him, taking his hand. We all missed the signs. Not you, he smiled sadly. You were always preparing, weren't you? Always watching, gathering evidence. You knew this day might come. I hoped it wouldn't. We sat in silence, looking at old family photos. Amanda and me as children, still innocent, still close. Before ambition and jealousy had poisoned everything. The company's yours now, I said finally. I know you always wanted to retire, but... No, he interrupted. I had my time. You've proven you're more than capable of leading Innovatech. Just, don't let it consume you. Don't let Amanda's actions turn you hard. I promised him I wouldn't. But as I sat in my office that night, staring at the second safe, I wondered. The company would survive, and so would I. A year had passed since Amanda's conviction. Innovatech was thriving, but peace never lasted long in the corporate world. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. MS. Mitchell. I represent a group of investors interested in discussing the future of Innovatech. I deleted it without finishing. We'd been getting similar messages for weeks. Vultures circling, thinking the company was vulnerable after the Porter scandal. Sarah, my assistant's voice, crackled through the intercom. The board wants to move the quarterly meeting up. They say it's urgent. Something in her tone made me pause. Who called for it? Director Wilson. Thomas Wilson, the longest-serving board member and my father's oldest friend. He wouldn't call an emergency meeting without good reason. The boardroom was tense when I arrived. Wilson sat at the head of the table, looking grave. We have a situation. He began without preamble. Someone's making moves against us. Big moves. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents showing massive share purchases through various investment firms, all leading back to one name. Victoria Chong. My blood ran cold. Victoria Chong. Tech industry titan. Known for hostile takeovers and dismantling companies for parts. She made Porter look like an imager. How much? I asked. 28%, Wilson replied. And she's not stopping. I did the math quickly. With that much stake, she only needed to convince a few more shareholders to gain controlling interest. There's more, Wilson continued. She's been meeting with former employees, including Marcus. Marcus, my former CFO, recently released after serving time for his role in Amanda's scheme. He knew our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities. He's been sharing information, Michael added, arriving late with more documents. Financial records, client lists, everything he had access to. I thought of the second safe in my home office, the one containing contingency plans for exactly this kind of situation. But using those documents meant crossing lines I promised myself I wouldn't cross. Call a shareholders meeting, I decided. I want to speak to them directly before Chang makes her move. That night, working late, I heard footsteps in the corridor. Security had been increased, but still burning the midnight oil. Victoria Chang stood in my doorway. She was older than I expected, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. A mess. Chang. I don't recall scheduling a meeting. She smiled, settling into a chair, uninvited. I thought we should talk, woman to woman, about the future. My company's future is secure. Is it? She placed a tablet on my desk, showing financial projections. Your stock's overvalued. The market's shifting. The tech bubble is about to burst. But I could protect Innovatech. Make it part of something bigger. By breaking it apart, selling it piece by piece. Her smile didn't waver. By making it efficient. Your father built this company on innovation. But times change. Sentiment has no place in business. My father built it on principles I corrected. On creating value, not just profit. Principles don't pay shareholders. She stood. Think about it. My offer's generous now. It won't be if I have to take this company by force. After she left, I sat in darkness, thinking. She was right about one thing. The market was changing. But breaking up Innova Tech wasn't the answer. I opened the second safe, reviewing its contents. Evidence of Chang's past dealings. Companies destroyed. Lives ruined. But using it meant becoming what I fought against. The shareholders' meeting was set for Friday. Thursday night, I received another visitor. Hello, Sarah. Marcus looked different after prison. Thinner, harder. But his smile was the same. Security will be here in 2 minutes, I warned. Plenty of time to deliver a message. A mess. Chang wants you to know she found Amanda. They had an interesting chat about family secrets. My heart stopped. Get out. After you left, I called Michael. Get me everything on Chang's recent prison visits. And check on Amanda. The report arrived an hour later. Chang had visited Amanda 3 times in the past month. And Amanda had been unusually cooperative with her parole board. The next morning, I made 2 calls. One to my father, warning him to be careful. The other to a number I'd hoped never to use. The shareholders' meeting started at 10. Chang sat in the front row, confident. Marcus beside her, smirking. I took the podium, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, before we discuss MS. Chang's offer, there's something you should know about the future of tech. What followed was not just a defense of Innovatech, but a revelation of our new direction. Patents we'd kept secret, innovations that would revolutionize the industry. Our stock would triple when announced. Chang's face darkened as she realized her hostile takeover was about to become much more expensive. But I wasn't finished. And now, regarding MS. Chang's recent activities. The screens behind me lit up with documents. Evidence of her corporate raids. But also of illegal practices, market manipulation, and worse. You can't prove any of this. She snarled, standing. The SEC disagrees. I replied as federal agents entered the room. They've been very interested in these records. The vote that followed was unanimous. Chang's bid was rejected. By evening, she was being questioned by federal investigators. Later, alone in my office, Michael brought more news. Amanda's parole has been revoked. Apparently, her meetings with Chang violated the terms. I nodded, feeling a hollow victory. And Marcus? Disappeared. But he won't get far. I looked at the safe behind the Rothko print, thinking of its remaining secrets. Weapons I hadn't needed to use. Yet? We've won, Michael said quietly. The company's secure. But I knew better. There would always be new threats, new challenges. The question was, could I face them without losing myself? My father called that night. I heard about Chang, he said. You did what you had to do. Did I? Sometimes I wonder if I'm becoming what I fought against. The difference, he said softly, is that you asked that question. Amanda never did. I stayed late, watching the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But tonight, I could rest knowing I protected what mattered, not just the company, but the principles it was built on. The second safe could stay closed. For now. 2 years had passed since Chang's downfall, and Innovatech had entered a new golden age. Our innovations had revolutionized the industry, just as promised. But success breeds new enemies, and old ones never truly disappear. The warning came through an encrypted email. Your sister sends her regards. Amanda had been released early. Good behavior, the prison said. But I knew better. Someone had pulled strings. I was reviewing security footage when my father burst into my office, pale and shaking. She's back, he said. And she's not alone. Amanda had formed a consortium with several tech investors, including former Porter executives and Chang allies. They weren't just after Innovatech anymore. They wanted revenge. The boards called an emergency meeting. My father continued. There are rumors. Documents surfacing. About Mom's death. My mother had died when I was 12, Amanda 16. Car accident, they said. Just like my accident years later. What documents? suggesting the company wasn't legally transferred to you. That mom left controlling interest to both of you jointly. I walked to the safe behind the Rothko print. The last documents inside, the ones I'd never wanted to use, contained the truth about that night. Call Michael, I said. It's time. The board meeting was chaos. Amanda sat beside her new allies, triumphant. She aged in prison, but her eyes still held that dangerous gleam. The evidence is clear, her lawyer announced. Your mother's original will designated both sisters as equal heirs. The document giving Sarah sole control was filed later under suspicious circumstances. I let them finish their presentation. Let Amanda have her moment of perceived victory. Then I opened the final file. These are security camera stills from the night Mom died. I said quietly from the office parking garage. The room went silent as the images appeared on screen. Amanda, 16 years old, arguing with our mother. Mom getting into her car, the car that would crash an hour later. And these, I continued, are brake line inspection reports. Notice the dates. Amanda's face had gone white. You can't prove anything. The garage cameras caught everything, Amanda. I found the footage years ago, but I kept hoping I was wrong. That my own sister couldn't have. She was going to cut me out. Amanda burst out. She said I wasn't responsible enough, that you were the only one she could trust with the company. She never gave me a chance. The room erupted, board members shouting, lawyers scrambling. Through it all, my father sat silent, tears streaming down his face. Hours later, after Amanda had been taken away by police, again, I sat alone in my office. The safe was empty now. All its secrets exposed. Michael found me there at midnight. The boards confirmed your control of the company. Amanda's consortium is falling apart. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not really. The truth about Mom's death was public now. Our family's darkest secret exposed. My father appeared in the doorway, looking ancient. I should have known, he whispered. All these years. She was 16, Dad. We all wanted to believe it was an accident. And you've carried this knowledge alone, all this time. I nodded. The weight of it had been crushing, but necessary. Until now. A week later, I stood in a cemetery, placing flowers on Mom's grave. The morning news had announced Amanda's confession. She would spend the rest of her life in prison. I wish things had been different. I told the headstone that she could have been the sister you wanted her to be. My phone buzzed, another crisis at the office. But for once, it could wait. I had something more important to do. I drove to my father's house, found him in his study, surrounded by old photos. Remember this one? He asked, holding up a picture. Amanda and me as children, laughing, holding hands. Before ambition and jealousy had poisoned everything. We were happy once, I said. Yes. He put the photo down. What now? Now we heal. And we make sure Innovatech becomes what Mom always dreamed it could be. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. The whole company gathered to hear the truth. Not just about recent events, but about our future. Innovatech was built on innovation, yes, I told them. But more than that, it was built on hope. On the belief that technology could make the world better. My mother believed that. And so do I. I announced new initiatives. Educational programs. Charitable foundations. Ethical technology guidelines. The company would still profit, but it would also give back. In my office later, I looked at the empty safe behind the Rothko print. Its secrets had protected the company, but at a terrible cost. I had a new safe installed, this one in plain sight. Inside went our new mission statement, our ethical guidelines, our pledges to the community. No more hidden secrets. The second safe in my home office, I had it removed entirely. Some weapons are too dangerous to keep, even as insurance. Years passed. Innovatech grew, not just in size, but in impact. We funded schools, launched sustainability projects, developed technologies that helped people instead of just profiting from them. Sometimes at night, I still think about Amanda, about the choices that led us here, about the sister I lost long before she ever went to prison. But mostly, I think about Mom. About the legacy she left, Not just of business success, but of principles. Of doing what's right, no matter the cost. The old saying claims that power corrupts. But maybe, just maybe, it can also redeem if we choose to use it wisely. My father retired officially, but still visits the office. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with a mixture of pride and sadness. "You're so like her," he said once. "Your mother, she would be proud of what you've built." "What we've built," I corrected him. "All of us together." The company continues to face challenges, of course. There are always those who value profit over principle, who would tear down what we've built. But we're ready for them now. Not with hidden documents or dark secrets, but with transparency. With ethics. With truth. That's the real legacy of Innovatech. Not just innovation, but integrity. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best revenge of all.